Welcome, gamers and readers. I am MonriaTitans, the writer for the Opinions and Truth blog and the host of the Weekend Game Show, where I educate on and discuss different aspects of game development to show why video games can take years to make to prevent another Cyberpunk 2077 launch scenario. And one of the ways I do this is with the Let's Read Some Shit videos, where I read aloud portions. Emphasis on portions for DMCA and copyright reasons of a couple of books regarding video games, their creation, their impact on the world, to show the legitimacy of video games as an artistic medium, and or whatever I feel like reading at the time, which is what's happening today. In addition, I also hope to promote literacy as a whole. I also provide artist shoutouts to human artists to combat AI art theft. All of them can be seen on the Opinions and Truth blog. All rights reserved by the artists. #CreateDon'tScrape. If this is something you're interested in, then you can find the other videos on my YouTube channel under the handle @MonriaTitans, and also on Buy Me a Coffee, where educational quotes regarding video games and literacy are shared. And quotes I like in general, along with the theme of the month. This month is Disability Pride Month, so quotes regarding the disabled community have been being shared every Wednesday. If you tip through Buy Me a Coffee, 15% of the proceeds minimum go to Kids Need to Read, whose mission is to help children discover the joy of reading and the power of a literate mind. With all that out the way. Alright, so today I'll be reading portions of Laziness Does Not Exist by Devon Price, Ph.D. I'll just, Dr. Devon Price. Jenara Nerenberg's Divergent Mind, Thriving in a World That Wasn't Designed for You. And my favorite of the three, because this is the one I've actually read, ADD Stole My Car Keys. The Surprising Ways Adult Attention Deficit Disorder Affects Your Life, and Strategies for Creating a Life You Love. By Rick Green and Dr. Umesh Jain. I hope I'm saying correctly. Alright, so these tend to go about an hour-ish. Can be longer, can be shorter, and they go as follows. Read the summary on the back of the book, if applicable. Read the About the Author section, if applicable. Read the foreword, preface, acknowledgments, and author's notes, if applicable. If there is no introduction, read part of Chapter 1. And we start with what I suspect is going to be my new favorite, after I eventually finish reading it. Laziness Does Not Exist. And you can see the images of the book there. I'm so glad I started doing that. It's been fun. Anyway, summary on the back of the book. We produce more value for our employers than any other generation of workers has. We consume more information in a single day than our great-grandparents did in weeks. Yet we feel lazier than ever. This is due to the Laziness Lie, a centuries-old belief system that says our worth is determined by our productivity, our limitations are weaknesses, and no matter how much we do, it is never enough. In Laziness Does Not Exist, social psychologist Dr. Devon Price tracks how the laziness lie spread through the United States during the eras of slavery and industrialization, and embedded itself into society. Price outlines how culture's hatred of laziness has poisoned... How our culture's hatred of laziness has poisoned almost every aspect of modern life, from work to school to our relationships to our views regarding social problems such as drug addiction, homelessness, and COVID-19. Laziness Does Not Exist gives the reader tips and exercises to unlearn the laziness lie. Interviews with therapists and industrial organizational experts provide practical advice on how to clarify your true values and learn to say no without shame. Throughout, Price offers science-based reassurances that despite feelings of guilt and laziness, each of us is already doing more than enough. A little bit about the author. Dr. Devon Price is a social psychologist, writer, and professor at Loyola University of Chicago School of Continuing and Professional Studies. Their work has appeared in Slate, Business Insider, The Financial Times, HuffPost, and Psychology Today, and on NPR and PBS. They live in Chicago, Illinois. And if I forgot to mention in the beginning of the video, I probably did. My apologies. If you hear a fan going on in the back, it's because I have a fan, or hear a strange noise in the back. It's because I have a fan going because the AC went out. And with the fans and the portable AC units, we have been able to create pockets of comfort. Yay! All right. Laziness Does Not Exist, a defense of the exhausted, exploited, and overworked. And according to the table of contents, they have an introduction. So we shall be reading that. There is no foreword, preface, acknowledgments, or author's notes. Oh, they do have a slightly longer about the author section in the very back of the book. What I read was on the back of the book. All right. So, about the author. Dr. Devon Price is an assistant clinical professor of applied psychology and data science at Loyola University Chicago School of Continuing and Professional Studies. That felt like a struggle. Their research on intellectual humility and political open-mindedness has been published in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology, Personality, and Social Psychology Bulletin, and the Journal of Positive Psychology. Devon's work has been featured on the front page of Reddit, and on National Public Radio. And they have been interviewed by outlets such as Sex Out Loud with Tristan Taormino, Chicago Tonight, and KPCC's Air Talk. Devon's essay, Laziness Does Not Exist, originally published to Medium in March 2018, now I want to watch it, or find it, has reached an audience of more than 2.5 million people and has been translated into Spanish, Portuguese, Arabic, German, Turkish, Mandarin Chinese, and Japanese. Wow. And has introduced people throughout the world to the idea that when we judge a person for being, quote, lazy, end quote, we're overlooking the immense barriers and challenges they're facing that we cannot see. I'm going to read that last bit again. And has introduced people throughout the world to the idea that when we judge a person for being, quote, lazy, end quote, we're overlooking the immense barriers and challenges they're facing that we cannot see. Devon's writing has appeared in Slate, The Rumpus, The Toast, Chicago Reader, The Huffington Post, Human Parts, and Elemental, and is regularly featured on Medium's front page. Congrats! Devon lives in Chicago with their partner Nick and their chinchilla dump truck. Cute. I'm glad I went to the back to see if there was another about the author section. That was good. All right. For Kim, who taught me that if a person's behavior doesn't make sense, it's because I'm missing a piece of their context. Damn! I'm about to add this to my 2BR stack. Anyway, I'm going to read that again. For Kim, who taught me that if a person's behavior doesn't make sense, it's because I'm missing a piece of their context. Thank you, Kim. All right, introduction. How I learned I wasn't lazy. Why is the font so small? All right. I have a reputation as a productive person, but that reputation has cost me a lot. To the rest of the world, I've always looked like a put-together, organized, diligent little worker bee. Little worker bee. For years, I managed to balance professional success, creative output, and activism without letting anybody in my life down. I never turned work in late. If I said I was going to be at an event, I'd be there. If a friend needed help editing a cover letter for a job application or moral support, as they called their congressional representative about the latest human rights horror of the moment, I was available. Behind that veneer of energy and dependability, I was a wreck. I'd spend hours alone in the dark, overstimulated, and too tired to even read a book. I resented every person I said yes to, even as I couldn't stop overcommitting to them. I was forever spreading myself too thin, dragging myself from obligation to obligation, thinking my lack of energy made me unforgivably, quote, lazy, end quote. End quote. I know a lot of people like me. People who work overtime, never turning down additional work for fear of disappointing their boss. They're available to friends and loved ones 24/7, providing an unending stream of support and advice. They care about dozens and dozens of social issues, yet always feel guilty about not doing, quote, enough, end quote, to address them. Quote, enough, quote. Okay. It looks like Pixel Chat is trying. Anyway, sorry. I'm going to restart that sentence because I got distracted. They care about dozens and dozens of social issues, yet always feel guilty about not doing, quote, enough, end quote, to address them. Because there simply aren't enough hours in the day. Right? These types of people often try to cram every waking moment with activity. After a long day at work, they try to teach themselves Spanish on the Duolingo app on their phone, for example, or they try to learn how to code in Python on sites like Code Academy. People like this, people like me, are doing everything society has taught us we have to do if we want to be virtuous and deserving of respect. We're committed employees, passionate activists, considerate friends, and perpetual students. We worry about the future. We plan ahead. We try to reduce our anxiety by controlling the things we can control and push ourselves to work very, very hard. Most of us spend the majority of our days feeling tired, overwhelmed, and disappointed in ourselves, certain we've come up short. No matter how much we've accomplished or how hard we've worked, we never believe we've done enough to feel satisfied or at peace. We never think we deserve a break. Through all the burnouts, stress-related illnesses, and sleep-deprived weeks we endure, we remain convinced that having limitations makes us, quote, lazy, end quote. End quote. And that laziness is always a bad thing. This worldview is ruining our lives. For years, I fell into an awful pattern where I'd work nonstop for the first 5 or 6 hours of the day, running through as many tasks as possible without any breaks. During those periods, I'd focus so intently on the mountains of emails I had to respond to or the papers I had to grade that I'll often forget to pause and eat a snack, stretch my legs, or even use the bathroom. Anyone who interrupted me during those cram sessions would get a blank and irritated stare. Once those 5 hours were over, I'd collapse into a cranky, hungry, emotionally drained heap. I loved being super efficient like that, plugging away at all the items on my to-do list that had given me anxiety the night before. I could get a truly impressive amount of stuff done during those sprints. But when I worked myself that hard, I'd be completely useless afterward. My afternoons were utterly unproductive, with me mindlessly scrolling through Instagram or Tumblr for hours. Tumblr! I still have mine. In the evening, all I had energy left to do was flop onto my bed, watch a few YouTube videos, and eat chips in the dark of my apartment. Eventually, after a few hours of, quote, recharging, end quote, I'd start to feel guilty for not using my time in more productive ways. I should be out with my friends, I'd tell myself. I should be working on creative projects. I should cook myself a nice healthy dinner. Ah, the word should. I'd start to feel stressed about everything I needed to accomplish the next day. And then, the next morning, the cycle of guilt, overwork, and exhaustion would start up all over again. Even back then, I knew this cycle was bad for me, and yet I found it hard to break out of. As terrible as my exhaustion felt, completing a huge pile of tasks in a couple of hours felt almost equally good. I lived to check things off to-do lists. I would get a rush when somebody would exclaim, "Wow, that was fast," because I'd emailed back sooner than they expected. I would agree to take on more responsibilities than I wanted to handle because I felt a deep need to show I was diligent, reliable worker. I felt a deep need to show I was a diligent, reliable worker. I missed a word. And then, after putting so many tasks on my plate, I would inevitably flame out and become depressed or sick. For years, I would berate myself for running out of steam. Whenever I didn't push myself to the limit, I felt shame about being stagnant. Whenever I said no to a task at work, I'd worry I wasn't earning my keep. If I failed to keep a friend when they needed it, oh, help. Wow. See? Small writing, not helpful. If I failed to help a friend when they needed it or didn't make it to a protest I'd planned to go to or a concert a friend was performing in, I'd feel certain everyone was judging me. I was terrified that any time I took a break or drew a boundary, I was being lazy. After all, there was nothing worse I could be than that. As awful as being tired, overwhelmed, and burned out with no energy for hobbies or friends was, surely being lazy was worse. I learned at an early age to tie my self-worth to how productive I was. I got good grades, and teachers generally thought I was bright, so they encouraged me to work extra hard, and take on more opportunities and responsibilities. Whether it was tutoring a struggling peer in civics class, or running the arts and crafts table at Bible camp, adults would constantly ask me to take on extra responsibilities, and I would always say yes. I wanted to help. I'm skipping words. I wanted to be helpful, industrious, successful. Something told me to take an Adderall this morning, and I didn't do it. Anyway, after all, working hard and doing a lot was how you ensured yourself a bright future. I had my reasons for worrying about the future. Adjusting my phone stand real quick, see if I can... Okay. I had my reasons for worrying about the future. My dad grew up in Appalachia, in an old mining town with depleted infrastructure. Job prospects were non-existent. As an adult, my dad was forever fretting about his financial future. He had cerebral palsy, which made it very difficult for him to write or type, so going to college or getting an office job seemed out of the question. Instead, he worked back-breaking manual labor jobs, knowing his body wouldn't be able to handle them forever. My mom was a dental hygienist, but she suffered from scoliosis, which left her able to work only 2 or 3 days per week. Neither of my parents had university degrees, so their professional options were limited. They desperately wanted me to avoid the same fate, so they taught me to plan and prepare and work hard. They signed me up for my school's talented and gifted program as soon as I was eligible. They encouraged me to get a part-time job, to take honors classes, and to participate in extracurriculars like Model UN, and speech and debate. They believed that if I worked hard, saved money, and took on many of life's, quote, extra, end quote, responsibilities, I could get ahead. I could get ahead. I could get into a decent school, earn some financial aid, and forge a successful career for myself. As long as I wasn't lazy. Teachers saw potential in me, and they strongly encouraged this too. This pressure to achieve my way into stability caused me significant anxiety, but the alternative struck me as far worse. I was already beginning to notice that not all kids were encouraged to thrive the way I was. Some kids were seen as lost causes because they were disruptive or too slow to master a subject. When those kids were still young, they received some support and some sympathy. But the longer they struggled, the less patience and compassion they got. Eventually, people stopped talking about those students' needs or limitations. Instead, the conversation became about how lazy they were. Once someone was deemed lazy, Once someone was deemed lazy, they were much likelier to get yelled at than they were to be helped. If a kid was lazy, there was no fixing it. It was their fault they were missing assignments, failing to grasp hard concepts, and not putting time into anything, quote, productive, end quote, after school. Lazy kids didn't have futures, and the world seemed to be telling me they deserved what they got. Max also learned to tie her worth to her productivity. Like me, she came from a family that spent multiple generations in poverty in the rural South. Like me, she went on to achieve academically and professionally at a high level. And like me, her commitment to overwork started to eat her alive. Today, Max is a writer at an information technology firm where she puts together applications and proposals as well as blog posts about the firm's work. In order to do her job well, Max needs a lot of support from her coworkers. They're supposed to provide her with detailed information on each project, completed application forms, and clean, well-written drafts. Often, though, Max doesn't get that information on time, leaving her scrambling to assemble what she needs herself, while a looming deadline and an impatient boss breathe down her neck. She regularly works 80 to 90-hour weeks and seems constantly to be at her wit's end. Those proposals had to be perfect, but I can't rely on anyone else to check them carefully enough, Max says. Every government agency that we work with has different requirements. Sometimes it will be something as specific as requiring that we sign our forms in blue ink, not black. But the people I work with miss this stuff all the time, and my manager doesn't actually manage them. So then I'm in the office from 6 a.m. until 10 p.m., fixing everybody else's work so we have a chance at getting the contract. Wow. I knew Max had problems with overwork and overcommitment when I heard her complaining, for probably the 10th time, about having logged 50 hours at work in the span of 3 days. I noticed how frazzled she always seemed to be, how irritation about her job had turned to anger and despair. Her typical workday involves writing and editing proposals for hours, then coming home, ordering takeout, and collapsing in front of the TV. Often, she's so exhausted that she forgets to eat the dinner she's ordered. Wow. Her once beloved hobbies, like witchcraft and embroidery, I want to embroider, often go neglected. On weekends, she sleeps in until 4 p.m., just to recharge her batteries and recover from the stress she endured during the week. She sometimes schedules massages and vacations to help herself decompress, but on a day-to-day basis, she's irritable and short-tempered and often remarks on the joylessness of her life. Why do I get the feeling if she were to quit, that company would collapse? Or that firm. I figured Max's intense lifestyle must have damaged her health, so I asked her about it. She said, "This fucking job ruined my health and my personal life. Last year, I had an inflamed gallbladder, but I didn't take any time off work because I knew my manager would pick apart my reasons for needing it and guilt me into coming into the office. By the time I went to the hospital, I was vomiting constantly and had to crawl on my hands and knees to the toilet instead of walking. They opened me up and found that my gallbladder was completely dead. The surgeon told me it was the most decayed one he'd ever seen and asked me why I hadn't come in to them a month earlier. Then he gave me a big lecture about how I needed to take more sick days at work. I wanted to scream. When I met Max, we were both aspiring writers, sharing little snippets of stories and essays with each other on Tumblr. The beauty of Max's writing immediately made me want to get to know her better. There was a calmness, a sense of perspective in her work back then, which I just didn't see in her life these days. She's an intense person, parentheses, a quality I admire, close parentheses, but her job has made her cranky and brittle. She doesn't have patience for inefficiency or anything that strikes her as foolish. Her temper can flare at something as simple as the pizza delivery person forgetting to bring ranch dressing. She hasn't written a short story in years. Max knows her work is consuming her life. She can see the toll it's taken on her relationships, her health, and her capacity to enjoy her hobbies. Max is also very aware that if she places unfair expectations on herself... Max is also very aware that she places unfair expectations on herself and that she shouldn't force herself to regularly work twice as many hours as her job supposedly requires. Still, she doesn't know how to stop. Like Max, I used to work to the point of exhaustion and illness, and had no idea how to make myself stop. Intellectually, I knew I was doing too much, but my fear of missing a deadline, or seeming lazy, kept me plugging away without breaks. I didn't learn to change my ways until overwork utterly destroyed my health. It was February of 2014, and I was putting the final touches on my dissertation. I'd known since I was a teenager that I wanted to get a Ph.D. in psychology. I should probably shut off my alarms. Anyway, and I was finally close to attaining it. I couldn't think about anything else. I spent hours and hours in the lab analyzing data long after my peers had gone home to their partners and children. I found an apartment 2 blocks from Loyola University where I was studying, so I wouldn't waste any time commuting to the office. I spent so much time there that I never bothered to buy furniture for my home or set up a home internet connection. Whoa. Then, about 2 weeks before I was scheduled to present my dissertation, I caught a nasty case of the flu. I didn't let it slow me down. I trudged into the office every day and stayed late into the night, the same as always, ignoring how sick I felt. I didn't even stop exercising. Wow. Since I didn't give myself any time to heal, the flu wouldn't go away. On the day of my dissertation defense, I was still running a fever and shivering in my suit jacket, trying desperately to hide it as I presented the results of my research. I graduated. The flu was still there. I started applying to jobs. I was still sick. For months, the flu stayed with me. I do my best to ignore it all day for the sake of remaining productive. But every evening, I'd start shaking and would feel so weak and faint that I'd have to lie on the ground, wrapped in blankets until morning. This continued for months. I spent that summer bundled in electric blankets, feeling absolutely freezing cold, even on 90-degree days. Still, I kept working. I tried to hide from my employer that I was debilitatingly sick. I felt shame over being so frail. I spent all my free time sleeping, but berated myself for being so lazy. Doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I was tested for rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and mono, but nothing came back positive. Then a cardiologist found I developed a heart murmur. And a hematologist found I had severe anemia, but neither could pinpoint why. I was still sick when winter came, nearly a year after the flu had started. That's scary. No medical test or treatment could help me. No doctor could cure the mysterious disease that was plaguing me. The solution, which I finally discovered in November of 2014, was that I needed to rest. Really rest. No faking I was fine. No pushing myself to exercise and write and go to work. It was excruciating to sit around doing absolutely nothing. I skipped work meetings and forced myself to relax because by then I had no other choice. My illness kept getting worse and denying my body's needs wasn't working. I spent the next 2 months being completely unproductive. No juggling work and illness, no apologizing for being, quote, lazy, end quote, by doing more work than was healthy for me. Slowly, my energy began to come back. The fever disappeared. My red blood cell count went up. My heart murmur went away. Once I was finally healed, it was time to re-enter the world and find a new way to live that wouldn't destroy my body the way my old life did. In the years that followed my illness, I focused on building a tenable life for myself. Oh, okay. I had to learn to budget time into my day for relaxation and recovery. I abandoned my dream of becoming a tenure professor, which would require countless hours of research. Instead, I taught classes part-time, as an adjunct, and sought out online teaching options as often as I could. This allowed me to have a more relaxed schedule. I took breaks and defended my free time fiercely. I taught myself slowly that I deserved to be comfortable, relaxed, and happy. That's when a funny thing happened. The more my health and wellness improved, the more I noticed that my students, colleagues, and friends exhibited the same kind of self-punishing attitudes toward work that I once had. Did I say notice? The more I noticed that my students, colleagues, and friends exhibited the same kind of self-punishing attitudes towards work that I once had. And just like me, they were beginning to pay a price for it. I realized that burnout, sick, overcommitted people were all around me. There was Max, with her 80 to 90-hour work weeks, my friend Ed, whose mental health was put in jeopardy by their commitment to the domestic violence hotline they worked for. Wow. And my colleague Alyssa, who is forever having to juggle the demands of parenting with the pressures of a full-time research job, all while being judged by her in-laws and neighbors for her child-rearing choices. Why are they judging her and not the father? Then there were dozens and dozens of my students, each of whom had been told at some point in school that they weren't doing enough to get ahead, that they were, quote, lazy, and therefore not deserving of happiness or success. I realized then that my struggles were part of a much bigger social epidemic, something I'm calling the laziness lie. The laziness lie is a deep-seated, culturally held belief system that leads many of us to believe the following. 1. Deep down, I'm lazy and worthless. 2. I must work incredibly hard all the time to overcome my inner laziness. 3. My worth is earned through my productivity. My worth is earned through my productivity. Work is the center of my life. 5. Anyone who isn't accomplished and driven is immoral. Yeesh. The laziness lie is the source of the guilty feeling that we are not, quote, doing enough, end quote. It's also the force that compels us to work ourselves to sickness. Once I began noticing the laziness lie all around me, I used the skills I learned as a researcher to delve deep into the history of laziness, as well as the most recent psychological studies about productivity. What I found brought me both massive relief and deep frustration. Research on productivity, burnout, and mental health all suggest that the average workday is far too long. I'm going to read that part again. Research on productivity, burnout, and mental health all suggest that the average workday is far too long. and that other commitments that we often think of as normal, such as a full course load at college or a commitment to weekly activism, are not sustainable for most people. Huzzah! I also came to see how the thing that we call, quote, laziness, end quote, is often actually a powerful self-preservation instinct. When we feel unmotivated, directionless, or, quote, lazy, end quote, it's because our bodies and minds are screaming for some peace and quiet. When we learn to listen to those persistent feelings of tiredness and to honor them, we can finally begin to heal. I spoke with therapists and corporate coaches and learned about the steps a person can take to establish limits in their professional and personal lives. I found that by advocating for our right to be, quote, lazy, end quote, we can carve out space in our lives for play, relaxation, and recovery. I also discovered the immense relief that comes when we cease tying our self-image to how many items we check off our to-do lists. The laziness we've all been taught to fear does not exist. There is no morally corrupt, slothful force inside us, driving us to be unproductive for no reason. It's not evil to have limitations and to need breaks. Feeling tired or unmotivated is not a threat to our self-worth. In fact, the feelings we write off as, quote, laziness, end quote, are some of humanity's most important instincts, a core part of how we stay alive and thrive in the long term. This book is a full-throated defense of the behaviors that get maligned as, quote, laziness, end quote. I'm saying end, but it keeps doing and. Anyway. Restarting the sentence because I let myself get distracted. This book is a full-throated defense of the behaviors that get maligned as, quote, laziness, end quote, and the people who have been written off as, quote, lazy, end quote, by society. It contains practical advice for how to draw better boundaries in all the areas of your life where you might run the risk of overcommitting, scripts for how to defend your boundaries and limits to other people, and tons of reassurance that your worst fear, that you are an irredeemably lazy person, is entirely misplaced. When people run out of energy or motivation, there's a good reason for it. Tired, burned out people aren't struggling with some shameful, evil inner laziness. Rather, they're struggling to survive in an overly demanding, workaholic culture that berates people for having basic needs. I'm going to read that again. Tired, burned out people aren't struggling with shameful, evil inner laziness. Rather, they're struggling to survive in an overly demanding, workaholic culture that berates people for having basic needs. We don't have to keep pushing ourselves to the brink, ignoring our body's alarm bells and punishing ourselves for self-recrimination. Oh, and punishing ourselves with self-recrimination. We don't have to deny ourselves breaks. We don't have to fear laziness. Laziness does not exist. Whoo, child. Yeah, now I'm just like skimming through it because, yeah, I'm about to add this to my book stack. My TBR to be read current reading book stack. Well, tower. My lovely honey called it a tower, and then that kind of stuck. So my book tower that I carry around sometimes to remind myself to read. But it got too heavy, so now I just carry one book. Anyway. And the reason why I do that is because I can't just sit and read one book. I have to hop around. Kind of like what I'm doing now. So, next. You can see the cover up there. Jenara Nerenberg, Divergent Mind, Thriving in a World That Wasn't Designed for You. All right, and there isn't a summary on the back of the book. It is, however, on the inside left cover. And the about the author is on the inside back cover. Yes. How does the book look without the paper over top? Now I'm curious. Oh, it's a blank book. No, it's not. It's a... Blank sounds mean. It's a blue cover. I'm getting distracted. Sorry, not sorry. ADHD. So, book summary. A paradigm-shifting study of neurodivergent women, those whose ADHD, autism, synesthesia, high sensitivity, and sensory processing disorder, exploring why these traits are overlooked and how society benefits from allowing their unique strengths to flourish. As a Harvard and Berkeley educated writer, entrepreneur, and devoted mother, Jenara Nerenberg was shocked to discover that her, quote, symptoms, end quote, only ever labeled as anxiety, were considered autistic and ADHD. Nerenberg's not alone. Between a flawed system that focuses on younger male populations and the fact that girls are conditioned from a young age to blend in, women often don't learn about their neurological differences until they are adults, if at all. As a result, potentially millions live with undiagnosed neurodivergences, obscured by anxiety and depression. Meanwhile, we all miss out on the gifts our neurodivergent minds have to offer. Sharing real stories from women with high sensitivity, ADHD, autism, misophonia, dyslexia, SPD, and more, Nerenberg explores how these brain variances present differently in women and describes practical changes in how we communicate, how we design our surroundings, and how we can better support divergent minds. When we allow our wide variety of brain makeups to flourish, we create a better tomorrow for us all. About the author. Jenara Nerenberg, close, is the founder of the Neurodiversity Project. A graduate of Harvard School of Public Health and UC Berkeley, Nerenberg was selected as a Brave New Idea presenter by the Aspen Institute for her work on reframing mental differences. Her interviews have been published by Fast Company, New York Magazine, Susan Cain's Quiet Revolution. Have I read that? I might own it. The Garrison Institute, the UC Berkeley Greater Good Science Center, and KQED. And Nerenberg is a frequent event host, workshop facilitator, and speaker for institutions including the Stanford Graduate School of Business, Park Day School, and elsewhere. And if you wish to find her on social media, Facebook and Instagram, Neurodiversity Project. Her website is divergentlit.com. Twitter at BopSource. And Jenara-Nerenberg on LinkedIn. Thankfully, the correct spelling of her name is there in the background. Awesome. Because I hate butchering names. And I hate it when Pixel Chat butchers names. Alright, Divergent Mind. Thriving in a world that wasn't designed for you. For my family, divergent. Adjective. 1. Tending to be different or develop in different directions. Divergent interpretations. Synonyms. Differing, varying, different, dissimilar, unlike, unalike, disparate, contrasting. All right, contents. We has an introduction. Yay. And the font for this one is a little bit better. All right. When I moved back to California after 6 years of reporting from Asia, my daughter, who was 2.5 years old at the time, cried, "Mom, you're just running around and around and around." Oh my gosh, I thought. She sees me. I have no idea what the hell I'm doing and how she's found it out. That same year, the National Institutes of Health announced $10.1 million in grants to counteract gender bias in research. I wish I had known at the time, because I would have volunteered myself as a subject. I was depressed, confused, anxious, tired, and plagued with a persistent feeling of inadequacy and the feeling that somehow I wasn't myself. I would drop my daughter off at her new preschool and feel as though I was wearing a mask around all other parents, for fear that they would discover how inept, turning the page, would discover how inept I was. Meanwhile, increasing tensions at home with my husband made it even harder to manage the mess of feelings and the literal mess of dishes and laundry. Symptoms only applied to women. Anyway, I was stumped. Here I was, a graduate of the Harvard School of Public Health in UC Berkeley, with reporting for CNN, Fast Company, Healthline, and elsewhere under my belt, and yet I couldn't for the life of me figure out how to make and stick to a decent schedule, stay on top of household duties, or hold logical conversations with my husband. Meanwhile, between 2013 and 2016, a slew of articles were published in major news outlets about how adult women were being overlooked in research about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, and autism. Writer and ADHD activist Maria Yagoda, it's with a D, not a T, but it was close, published a story in The Atlantic about being a student at Yale who struggled with a broad range of executive functioning, from cleaning to losing items and money to tracking what time to be where. People didn't believe she could have ADHD because she was so smart. Spectrum published a similar story about girls and women with autism. A young woman named Maya was profiled, who was thought to struggle with severe anxiety and other challenges until she was finally recognized as being autistic. I mean, just search through hashtag 88 actually autistic and you'll find a lot of stories. I think Facebook was listening to my conversations with family members and therapists, because suddenly articles and books started popping up in my newsfeed about women with ADHD and Asperger's syndrome, which is not a diagnosis anymore, by the way, and about the highly sensitive person, HSP. I started seeing new research coming out about the mental health challenges of high-achieving women, and I was transfixed, captivated, utterly glued to what I was reading, because it turned out I wasn't alone. Study after study indicated high rates of depression and anxiety among successful, Pixel Check caught it, so I'm going with it, women. But other traits, like ADHD and autism, were beginning to surface as well. I had never thought of these before, but I couldn't deny that what I was reading was resonating with me. I was sensitive. I liked talking about only a few select topics: people, psychology, and inner life, my special interests. Or we could just stop pathologizing it and call it passions. Anyway, logistics might as well have been an alien language, and this word masking kept jumping out at me, as describing an experience that I didn't realize or want to admit to. So I begin this book by sharing a kind of confusion that plagued me at the time, a feeling of shock and dissonance but also of hope and relief. Could I be on some kind of sensory spectrum, like the autism spectrum, or did I have ADHD? Both seemed likely, but I didn't seek out assessment, diagnosis, confirmation, or anything like that. Instead, I turned to research, studies, news articles, and countless interviews and stories with women who sounded a lot like me. That's actually the smarter way to go. Masking. Masking. Hello? So you catch hello but not masking? Thank you. Masking refers to an unconscious or conscious effort to hide and cover one's own self from the world as an attempt to accommodate others and coexist. That's one way to put it. Research and anecdotal evidence show that an extensive amount of masking and passing is going on among women and girls, primarily because of the way women are socialized. This is definitely a used book because someone underlined the crap out of it. Anyway. Girls and women have been taught from an early age to blend in, according to researchers and the many women I interviewed for this book. Often, women hear the common refrain, "Oh, she's just sensitive, that's how girls are." This is a sloppy but widespread oversight in our culture. Masking claims many lives, and I don't necessarily mean that women literally commit suicide, although that can happen as well, but they may commit a kind of virtual suicide, leaving many women feeling empty, depressed, and anxious, and robbing them of living according to their true selves. When society is not equipped to hold an accurate mirror up to you, you end up interpreting your reflection according to available lenses, structures, and terminology. But they're often wrong and misleading, or worse, harmful. My depth of curiosity, sensitivity, persistent wondering, and questioning, my insatiable hunger to know and understand, is not mirrored in the wider culture, even in academia. I am deeply curious about the inner lives of others and understanding them, which often looks like asking a ton of questions. Good thing I became a journalist, but this is not how people make friends. It took me a long time to figure that out, so instead of accepting myself as curious, passionate, and inquisitive, I felt different and isolated. Slowly allowed my mannerisms and gestures to match those I witnessed around me and the messages I was getting. Namely, don't ask too many personal questions, don't talk too much, don't deliver essay-length monologues on philosophical topics. Huh? Essay-length monologues. Oh my goodness. Don't deliver essay-length monologues on philosophical topics. Arigato. Over time, I changed. Some of the change was likely because of natural maturation, but certainly some of it felt painful and necessary in order to adapt. I had to stuff a lot of my curiosity, and I turned to reading and to other independent ways to explore the expanse of the mind, meaning I spent less time interacting with other people and more time alone. Again, these are not bad things in and of themselves, but at the time I was operating in a binary of abnormal and normal. Quote unquote around abnormal and normal, and thought those were my only options in order to coexist with the world. I had no knowledge yet of the wide diversity of ways that the brain is made up and ways that people interact. So without anyone telling me otherwise, without any mirrors reflecting who I was, I masked and suppressed. I masked and suppressed. This is happening for women across the globe. In the past, we were labeled hysterical, but now we are anxious. What many women don't know, and this includes the doctors and therapists with whom we interact, is that other mirrors are available to us that reflect previously hidden parts of ourselves. It is said that the senses can be gateways to the soul, and I take that quite literally. Sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell correspond to either a mental health or a mental distress, depending on our sensitivities. Think of an onion with its many layers. At the core of our being are our genes, biology, and childhood experiences, but also our sensory makeup. That is, how our nervous system responds to and interacts with our sensory world, what delights us, and what repels us. Over time, throughout our lives, all of these components interact, producing layers of emotions and resulting behaviors. When some of us end up in a therapist's or doctor's office with anxiety, depression, or autoimmune health conditions, our options are limited to talk therapy or medication because only those outer layers of emotion and behavior are probed. We have been going about our lives and professions thinking we know the full list of possible diagnostic criteria, but the senses have been left out, and thus a very core component of what makes people who they are goes completely untended. Many people think of outdated stereotype images when they consider autism and ADHD, and it's important to remember that there is a spectrum of experiences. It's likely that these labels could apply to people in your own life. Perhaps your boss, neighbor, friend, or family member, or even you. What I see as a fundamentally missing part of, What I see as a fundamentally missing What I see as. I keep skipping as. What I see as fundamentally missing from the conversation is a rallying point around diversity and how individuals process sensory input, and specifically recognizing a broad occurrence of heightened sensitivity. Some people may be fine with leaving this discussion at what has already been expertly explored by Elaine Aron in her 1996 book, The Highly Sensitive Person, How to Thrive When the World Overwhelms You. But I'm not. I want psychology and psychiatry to take sensitivity concerns further because of how they affect people's work, family life, education, economic opportunities, intimacy, and parenting. The public and professionals need to understand that people with sensory differences, such as autism and ADHD and a few other neurodivergent traits we will learn about in this book, such as sensory processing disorder, SPD, HSP, and synesthesia, experience heightened sensitivity across the board, and these differences affect nearly every aspect of our lives. Many such neurodivergent women are suffering, as many times these traits occur along with anxiety and depression, especially if the underlying sensory differences go undiagnosed. The full scope of such differences, which often merit a diagnosis, is often unknown not only to friends and family, but also to the women themselves. One woman I interviewed graduated from Columbia University but wasn't diagnosed until the age of 28. Likewise, a mom in California didn't realize her own autistic and ADHD traits until she was in her 40s and her son was diagnosed. That's actually quite common. She recognized that his symptoms were ones that she had been dealing with her whole life. I realized my own neurodivergences at the age of 32. Only because I started digging into the latest research. Ow. Whoever had this last, I wonder why they got rid of the book. They got notes all over the place. Sorry. An entire demographic of women is now being referred to as a lost generation, because an extensive amount of depression and anxiety surface as a result of internal experiences that don't match up with what the world expects or how the world views such women, since they appear to function normally on the outside. This lack of awareness and understanding is largely due to neglect on the part of researchers, because study samples often rely on streamlined populations of men. Therefore, doctors, therapists, teachers, and police officers just don't know what a woman with ADHD, Asperger's, synesthesia, SPD, or highly sensitivity might look like, or how she might act. As a result, thousands of women have no name for their life experiences and feelings. When I began encountering questions, I started digging deeper, fueled by wanting to have a name, a label for my experience in the world, how I show up, how my mind and body react to certain situations, and most of all, why I felt so bad about myself. Whew. All right. Normally, I would read the entire thing, but apparently I started this whole thing too soon. And we're getting close to when my lovely honey would get home. And time to when I would start to cook dinner. So let me look at ADD, some of my car keys real quick. How long is their introduction? They don't have one. So they have the summary on the back of the book about the author, a dedication, which I'll treat as acknowledgments. Oh, they have an acknowledgments. Why isn't that in the... Did I miss it in the contents? They don't have it in the table of contents. All right, so they have summary about the author, acknowledgments and preface, and an introduction, which they did not put in the contents, but they are short. So I'm going to keep reading through Divergent Mind, see where we're at around 4. No, he gets off work at 3:30. All right, I'll read this next section, then switch books, but this is my own timekeeping. I did not. This is what I get for not planning better. All right. Neurodiversity, the game changer. One day, on a flight from South Korea to Nepal, I started imagining that there may be more people out there like me. And what if there were other ways of being in the world that didn't have names or labels yet, especially for women? I created the phrase temperament rights. Temperament rights to capture this idea of one's temperament or neurological makeup being respected in the same way that we respect other core aspects of people, such as gender, sexuality, or ethnic identity. I started to imagine a world in which the richness of the human interior, what we call one's inner life, is acknowledged and respected with the same awareness of diversity that we see in terms of outer categories of identification such as race, culture, sexuality, expression, and gender. If courageous leaders and activists before me had rallied around the importance of recognizing these outer categories, couldn't we do the same for internal categories of identification? Don't our inner lives deserve just as much attention as our outer lives? Having an inner life and an internal emotional world is universal. Oh, it's something all of us possess. And something like ADHD or high sensitivity can show up in anyone. Women and men, white folks and people of color, trans folks and cis folks. Cis. Okay. CIS. Folks. Being the person I am, I rushed to my laptop and started searching around to see whether others were talking about this. It didn't take me long to find the term neurodiversity, which means recognizing and celebrating the diversity of brain makeups instead of pathologizing some as normal and others as abnormal. What happened next is one of those moments in life that haunt me in the best of ways. I had been noticing a striking man walking my street early in the morning each day with his daughter beside him. A sense of joy within him, a freedom, a walk that signaled openness and calm and groundness. His ever-present smile was notable. Oh, I did say it right. I passed him almost every day while walking my own daughter to her school. And when I was at my computer months later in Asia and discovered neurodiversity for the first time, this same man's face popped up on the screen. It turned out that he, Nick Walker, is a notable neurodiversity author and scholar. And he lived just a few blocks away from me. At the same time, and thanks to Twitter's algorithms, I found the tweets of author and neurodiversity expert Steve Silberman and started to delve into what would come to define the next few years of my life, an exploration and investigation of neurodiversity. And as much as I would love to continue this, I accidentally put myself on a time crunch because I did not plan this well. So, 1-800, my bad. All right. ADD stole my car keys. There is a summary on the back of the book. Let me start over. ADD Stole My Car Keys, written by Rick Green, and hopefully I'm saying this right, Umesh Jain. Oh! Hee hee. Spelled the last name wrong, but the first name was right. Yes! Alright. Do you suspect that you or someone you know has attention deficit hyper whatever it's called? You know, that ADD that everyone keeps talking about? The one you figure is probably an excuse that slackers invented to cover up the fact that they are sloppy, lazy, forgetful, and undisciplined? Or maybe you actually have an ADHD, ADD diagnosis. And optimistically assume, I've pretty much got it handled. Anyway, I'm too old to change. At this point, it's just who I am. Prepare to be surprised. ADD Stole My Car Keys will transform how you view yourself and ADD. Authors Rick Green and Dr. Umesh Jain reveal 155 common signs, symptoms, behaviors, and challenges that people with ADD face. Through entertaining first-person stories, you'll discover the many ways this misunderstood mindset sabotages the lives of adults. ADD looks different in adults. ADD. Thank you. It's easy to miss or dismiss. You may squirm, laugh, blush, or gasp as you recognize yourself in these pages. Be warned, what you have always believed are your faults, failings, and weaknesses may actually be the result of how your brain is wired, and there are ways to work with it. While Rick and Dr. J explore the complex interplay between nature and nurture, they also offer proven strategies you can use to master the challenges of your particular type of ADD, so that you can create a life that you love. Finally. All right. Dedication. To everyone who has ADHD and the people who care about them, which pretty much includes everyone, whether they realize it or not. All right, acknowledgments, preface, and introduction, and then I's gonna call it. I'm gonna call it. All right, acknowledgments. We would like to thank our wives, Ava Green and Preeti Jain. Preeti? Oh. Preeti. For their love, patience, and encouragement. We want to thank our children, to whom we hope we leave a better world. Dr. J would like to thank his new puppy, who reminds him that even animals can have ADHD and love life. A special thanks to Patrick and Janice McKenna, whose courage in sharing their path to discovery has helped more people than they will ever know. We are all indebted to them for the documentary ADD and Loving It, and all that it has inspired. We are also indebted to Michael Cott, Len Carter, and Can West Global Television. Can West. Thank you for trusting a comedian to create ADD and Loving It. Thanks as well to Jimmy Dodge, or is that Jimmy Doige? Because it's Doidge. Okay. Doidge. Why is it missing that first D? Anyway, for showing up at the office every day and making work so much fun. To Aaron and Jimmy Guy, Lisa Booth, Jennifer Johnston, Pam Sinclair, and Bruce Dodge, The Secret Location, and everyone else who has worked on or contributed to the TotallyADD.com website. To Dr. Edward Hollowell, Dr. Laura Mugley? Good grief. Muggli. To Dr. Stephen Kurtz, Dr. Leonard Adler, Dr. Margaret Wise, Dr. Anik Vincent, Kate Kelly, and Tom Hartman for sharing what they have learned. Thanks Gina Pera for her enthusiasm. Ruth Hughes and everyone at CHED for their endorsement and ongoing collaboration. Thanks to ADDA. Why is it missing the first words now? Thanks to ADDA for letting so many people know about us. Heidi Bernhardt at CADAC. Bernhardt at CADDAC. Okay. For her tireless dedication to the cause. Alan Foster and the good folks at EPS for getting us on PBS. And the amazing dedicated people at PBS who made sure the word got out to millions of families. Thank you. Thanks to Mike Mancuso? Oh! And Ava Green for editing our words so they actually made sense. To Carm Galati and Bryce Hallett, we are inspired by your creativity and grateful to work with such classy, funny guys. And thanks to you for having the courage to buy this book and take on your life with a growing sense of what is possible. Could they have made the font size any smaller? Probably. Anyway, Preface. We want to make you smile. Life is full of challenges, and the life of an ADDer has extra hurdles. Humor is your best defense, both as a shield and a sword. When you can laugh at something, it diminishes the fear. The book is built around 155 ADDers' personal experiences. ADDER''S. These capture the range of beliefs, challenges, and symptoms that adults with ADHD commonly struggle. Dr. Jain, a psychiatrist specializing in ADHD, reveals the facts. Rick Green, a comedian who has ADHD, shares his best and worst moments. Feel free to laugh. We use this simple structure because ADDers can be impatient. They prefer to-the-point commentary. This book was designed to deliver what you need to know in easily digestible bites. Besides, we have trouble focusing long enough to write ponderous chapters. Ponderous. Have I been running this for too long? Not every one of the 155 signs will apply to you. The human brain is complex. Each person's situation is different, so every ADDer is unique. Yet they have much in common. Yeah. Yet they have. If you have been diagnosed with ADHD, this may feel like your personal log. We have written it so that you can recognize your own story. Some of this is our opinion based upon our experiences. We hope that it resonates with you. Feel free to write all over the book. Yes, no, that's my dad. Or mom. Per the last book we were reading. Anyway, if you have never been diagnosed but suspect you might have ADHD, you may recognize yourself in these pages again and again. You may experience a growing sense of familiarity or a lightning bolt of insight. a feeling of having arrived, or even feeling stark naked and totally exposed. Rather chilling, isn't it? The good news is, now you know. Now you have a chance of getting a handle on it. But first, get some clothes on. You're naked, for God's sake. Haha. I ruined that because I didn't realize that was coming. Anyway. Of course, you will want more information. You can begin your journey of discovery at www.totallyadd.com. Totallyadd.com. We have created this community to provide useful tools and strategies and point you to other books and online resources. So laugh and chuckle, but trust that this book contains reliable information about ADHD. We have written it as a primer so that after you stop chuckling or squirming or crying your eyes out over all the needless suffering you've been through, you will be armed with a clear sense of what ADHD is and what it is not. All right. And a shorter introduction. Sorry about that. That's what I get for not paying attention to how long that first introduction was going to be and underestimating how much time that would take. Anyway, introduction. Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, ADHD, is the most common developmental neuropsychiatric disorder of childhood, and by default, one of the most common disorders in adulthood. Well, duh. This is a chronic, highly heritable neurological condition. And undiagnosed, it sucks. If you're new to adult ADHD, prepare to be surprised. Much or all of what you know may be wrong. Scientific breakthroughs in genetics and new brain imaging technologies are shedding new light on the neurology. But the mythology lives on and on and on. Let's start with the name. While the lay public will often use the terms ADD and ADHD interchangeably, they are different. ADD individuals have problems with inattention, like focusing, distractibility, sticking to things, whereas ADHD folks also have two more challenges, impulsivity and motor hyperactivity, which may evolve by adulthood into internalized anxiety and or restlessness. So, everyone, whether ADD or ADHD, has the inattentive symptoms. ADHD folks also have hyperactivity and impulsivity. We explore these three areas in detail. In this book, we sometimes use ADD to cover both ADD and ADHD if what we're talking about applies to both. Aha! The diagnosis is defined by the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, DSM, by the American Psychiatric Association. Oh, I guess towards the end is an acceptable time to start having hiccups. This book is the standard reference for doctors. It is constantly being revised, and the 5th edition is expected in 2013 or 2014 or 2015. ADDers aren't the only ones with issues around deadlines. We explore many associated symptoms such as procrastination and organizational problems, which are not part of the diagnostic criteria, but will certainly resonate with ADHD adults. There are many tests and questionnaires around. Some are quite good. The Adult ADHD Self-Report Scale, ASRS, for example, is on our website, www.totallyadd.com. Totally, you had it right. We haven't included any quizzes in this book because none of them are diagnostic, but they can certainly act as a screener tool. In other words, they cannot provide a definitive yes or no, but they can suggest, boy, this is looking more likely. Or, maybe something else is going on with me. If you're struggling, seek an assessment by a professional. There is a great deal that can be done and to turn things around. A holistic approach involving the mind and the body can be transformative. That is good news, and it's the place to focus your attention, especially if you have trouble focusing. And that is it. Chapter 1 is Common Beliefs ADHD People Share. Actually, I'm going to read that bit. Even in childhood, you knew you were different. but you couldn't explain how or why. I do not have a whole lot of memories of my childhood, so that wouldn't help me much. Why am I tired? Alright, so I need to do these more often. This should not be tiring me out. Alright, and we come to the thank yous. I should probably make a new scene. Alright, so if I was streaming on Twitch, all those commands would make sense. But it's basically showing I've got a Discord. You'll be able to get to the link through the card link I'll have in the description. And I also has a bookshop on bookshop.org, what I like to call the Etsy for small business bookstores. You want to try to get away from Amazon, get books for yourself, support the channel, well, you can do 3 skips with a stone and go to bookshop.org/shop/MonriaTitans and check out MonriaTitans Bookshop. I have not yet figured out a better title, and that makes me sad. I was thinking Rendezvous Point, but that's too long. Anyway, I recently re-added another bookshelf called Artist Alley that has how-to art books. Artist Alley. There we go. And there are the other links and things. I'm an artist myself. And if you have any interest in supporting that, that's Titans and Riot Ko-fi. I didn't share an artist shout out today. Those are only Saturday through Monday. But if you would wish to check those out, you can check out the artist shout outs Ko-fi. And if you wanted to assist with the streaming, that's the MonriaTitans WGS. But if you just want to help me make more book videos, buy more books to make more book videos, I had to wait until these books arrived to do this Disability Pride Month Let's Read Some Shit video. And the only reason why I was able to do that is because my unemployment was finally approved. Yay! That was a thing. Not getting into that. And here is a slightly bigger view for the bookshop. You may not like video games, but what I learned from them is this. No enemies in front of you means you're going the wrong way. My favorite quote about video games. And I need to create a new closing scene. Because the opening is yellow, and now we're back to purple. Because streaming. Although technically this is a WGS thing, so I could leave it at purple. I'm confusing myself because I'm tired. I'll shut up. After we close. And now we close! Remember, we are gamers not because we don't have a life, but because we choose to have many. Which can also be said of readers. If anyone asks why you like video games, remind them a game is a problem-solving activity approached with a playful attitude, a quote by Jesse Schell. And if anyone gives you shit for your interest, tell them you may not like video games. What I learned from them is this. No enemies in front of you means you are going the wrong way. And since this was about reading, I will be stating the quote you would have seen in the very beginning. Quote you would have seen in the very beginning. Okay. If you want to be a writer, you must do 2 things above all others. Read a lot and write a lot. There's no way around these 2 things that I'm aware of. No shortcut. Stephen King. Thank you for watching. May every decision you make be in the spirit of fairness, and may the rest of your day not go to shit. See you next time.